So the break is over. We can start the second part of the discussion. The main issue of that part is fake news as an important factor in the influence of digital platforms and social networking sites on the guarantees of freedom of speech and truthness of information in Poland and Hungary. The first speaker from Polish team, Mr. Roland Szymczykiewicz, will tell us about the review of legal regulations of the basis of which the functioning of digital platforms and social media in a given country is allowed. The concept of fake news in Poland and fake news classification in Poland.
Thank you very much. My speech will be divided into two parts, one about the fake news and one about those mentioned regulations. I must say that a lot of information has already been given. First of all, the biggest problem is that there are no legal regulations which precise the matter of how social media are supposed to be functioning and how the censorship should be provided. There's an act, a legal act of providing services by electronic means, but this act contains only a general permission for services to be run. It doesn't contain any specific special issues it doesn't have any special issues, or also doesn't give any, how to say it nicely, it doesn't precisely say how should they function. It gives a free way of functioning. That's why we are facing problems that we are talking about. The problem of fighting with the fake news, the problem of certain violations of law. All the things we're dealing with come because of the matter that let's say thing isn't quite precisely regulated. The functioning, the way they're working is not precise, so they do it basing on their own regulations. As we have said, they're fully independent enough to cut off the President of the United States of America from the internet, which is really amazing. Because of the lack of law, as has been said already, there is a project, the project of Polish Ministry of Justice, which has an innovative approach, which is trying to be modern and trying to regulate this whole difficult matter. Of course, this is a draft. Probably there will be some discussion, and also there will be some minor, bigger changes, but it needs to be proceeded because it regulates the matter. First of all, it does things that must be done. What I mean, it brings and creates some legal terms which will be used and which need to be defined. Those terms are, for example, the definition and the term of limitation of content, the definition of limitation of a user's profile. It defines the whole procedure of violation notification and of appealing if somebody is not satisfied with the decision. A new special body is created to deal with such things. We must remember that the freedom of speech is not only that we can say whatever we like to do and upload on the internet whatever we want to do. It's also our right to ask for removing some material, for removing some content, and also our right to appeal if somebody doesn't want to do it, but according to us, the content is violating our rights, is making us some harm, is bringing damage, especially damage if it's material, if it's connected with some money. The project also has a very important term as disinformation. It doesn't use the term false news, which I'll be talking about in a minute, but it uses the word disinformation. And we must say that using the term disinformation isn't done by an accident. because this term is used also by other countries. For example, we can refer to Great Britain, where the special report of the parliament said that the word disinformation is proper and exact to the problems, the things we deal connected with social media, with the false information, with content that is disturbing and harming somebody's rights, and the problem of information that is not true by itself. So it contains such a term, and it says that by disinformation, we can understand false or misleading information created, presented, or spread for profit or for violation of public interest. So it's a very wide definition, and I think it's in point. It's just the definition we need because it defines the problem we're dealing with. Now I shall move to the second part of my presentation about fake news, because all of this is strictly connected one with each other. For the beginning, I'd like to say about the story, a true story I faced on a situation I saw. Imagine you're running a renovation company. You renovate flats. It's a job, and one of the customers is not satisfied by the way the renovation is done. Okay, it is his right, but he puts in the internet false photos of the renovation, and those photos are really ugly. Those photos show the flat that's completely destroyed, and these are not true. These are not from these places even. And there's given a full name of the company, the surname of the owner, and all the data connected with his company. And imagine when the person claimed to Facebook to remove this data, he was denied, and he had no law to appeal. He only asked for reconsidering the question. It was reconsidered, but negatively, and the news remained. And what was happening? If you were writing in the Google renovation Warsaw and his surname, those photos appeared, and comments saying that he doesn't completely know how to do his work, just to let's call in a gentle way. And everybody who looked at it didn't want to cooperate with such a company. So it was like a real destruction for the company. It had to change his name before the court trials are still going on. And it was a type of fake news, that the company did a job in a bad way. And this is a type of fake news that all of us may face. Now, speaking about fake news in a general term, first of all, there's in Polish law, there's no legal definition. It's a very wide and open term, and it's very oftenly used nowadays. But as I had said, it's so wide that it includes a lot of situations. And there's also a legal division, but in my opinion, we could say about at least 3 types of fake news. First of all, the most dangerous one are those that are dealing with public health, with public interest, and with national security. These are extremely dangerous types of fake news because they can cause really huge damage. Secondly, we could say that there are fake news connected with well-known people, with celebrities, with politicians, that also can be really harmful, but of course on a different level. And for the third type of the fake news, those concerning companies, us, regular people, connected with our regular lives, with our friends, with our families, which also can bring harm. Now, what's happening with those fake news? It isn't done this way, that we have a legal vacuum and nothing can be done. We have legal matters, we have legal acts that deal with certain problems. For example, as I have said earlier, we can have a lawsuit for protection of our personal rights. If a fake news is abusing our personal rights, we have legal ways to act according to the civil procedure. We have some criminal reaction already to some behaviors that are that we can classify as fake news. For example, for false bomb alarms. In some time, it was a really huge problem in Poland, and the law has been changed, and it becomes a crime if somebody calls a false alarm, bomb alarm, especially. We have also, as I have said earlier during my last speech, the crime of defamation. Defamation is also a way of spreading fake news about somebody, because it also can hurt somebody, can bring damage, and it is regulated. So the question is, what else should be done, how to regulate it, and what should be regulated? One of the questions is, should it be regulated by civil law? Should we just create a new term, or should we use the word disinformation? Should we treat it by criminal law only, or cooperating with civil law? And how to deal it in the way we are talking today mostly, and how to deal with social media and with the information which is sent to the social media. So this part about dealing with the information that is sent to the social media and which is uploaded there isn't at the moment regulated, as I have said, and most of us were talking about. The huge private corporations have their own internal rules, independent, and they do whatever they like. And of course, that needs to be changed. And national laws, according to me, should deal with it, because we have the right to have a clear, maintained procedure of making claims and for appealing from the first decision, which is not good for us, which we recognize as harmful to us, to ask to remove some violations, to stop some violations. And as I have said, there's a project of the Polish Ministry of Justice using the word disinformation, and this project approaches this problem by creating the whole procedure of complaints, the whole procedure of saying and dealing with the violations, and does it by forcing the companies to have representatives, and the representatives have to deal with claims and with the reported actions that may be fake news or may be harmful in any other way. So it regulates this matter, and we need it. And I hope personally that there will be a debate, and that this issue will be recognized further. And I am very curious, how do you in Hungary, what are your problems with fake news? Because I see that we have the same problems with social media, that they do whatever they want in their independence. So I'll be finishing, and I'll be listening very carefully. What is your vision of fake news, and what are your regulations? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your speaking, sir. Now I would like to ask first speaker from Hungary, Mr. János Sinek, to present us the topic: review of legal regulations on the basis on which the functioning of digital platforms and social media in a given country is allowed, the concept of fake news in Hungary, and the fake news classification in Hungary. The floor is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you for the floor. My talk also consists of two parts. In the first part, I will give you some background basic information of the legal regulation of digital platforms in Hungary. And after that, in the second part of my speech, will be about the fake news in Hungary. As I mentioned before, social media platforms are considered intermediary service providers under EU law. It means that these providers store, organize, and make user content available in their own system. In case of a user reported infringing content, they must remove the content based on the notice and takedown procedure. However, according to the e-commerce directive, no prior inspection or general monitoring may be imposed on them. So in Hungary, the e-commerce directive was adopted by the Act on Certain Issues of Electronic Commerce Activities and Information Society Services Act. According to the regulations of the intermediary service provider is subject to special liability rules and may therefore be released from liability under certain conditions. Under Article 12 of the directive, these conditions are: the transmission of the information is not initiated by the service provider. The second is that the recipient of the transmission is not chosen by the service provider. And last but not least, the additional information is not selected or changed by the service provider. The EU directive follows the principle of the establishment. It means that the service provider who actually carries out an economic activity on a permanent basis for an indefinite period, is considered to be established in the EU. Legal claim relating to Facebook can therefore be enforced in the courts of the state of domicile or state of establishment. As a result, the claim must be resolved in a competent court in the Republic of Ireland, and the Irish law will govern the claim. As we mentioned it before, in Hungary, the National Media and Info Communications Authority has the legal ability to enforce Hungarian media law. However, it can't directly influence the content of social media. The most important body of the authority regarding social media is the Media Council, which consists of a president and 4 regular members, all elected by the position by 2/3 of the Hungarian parliament. To sum up the first part, the social media platforms are considered intermediary service providers under the EU law, and the National Media and Info Communications Authority has the legal ability to enforce Hungarian media law in our country. And now comes the second part, the concept of fake news in Hungary and the fake news classifications in Hungary. The fake news on social media is not an isolated phenomenon, but a complex technological and cultural change in our society. It is difficult to distinguish it from false statements of fact and statements of fact in the field of personal rights violations. In Hungary, there is no official definition of fake news. It is absolutely not easy to distinguish the different types of fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. According to papers published by Hungarian scholars, fake news is some kind of contrived false information, which can be intentionally or accidentally distributed information. The intentional distribution of the information can be profit-oriented or influential, and the accidentally distributed fake news can be viral or based on negligent fact-finding. The rulings of the Hungarian Constitutional Court is harmonizing with the practice of the European Court of Human Rights. As a result, proven false statements of fact are not covered by journalistic freedom. Opinions are also protected by the Constitutional Court, so it is important whether a claim is a statement of fact or an opinion. In relation to Hungary, we cannot mention a similar example. According to the case law, the European Court of Human Rights emerging hierarchy of political speech enjoys the highest level of protection. The artistic expression is less protected. The bottom line stands for hate speech or as unjustified excessive profanity. The case law of Constitutional Court of Hungary seems to support the view that it is much more beneficial for democracy if some untrue or even unjustifiably offensive statements are included in public discourse, resulting in fruitful public debates, than if political actors involved in public life fear of possible sanctions, and as a result, they use self-censorship. As the self-regulation of social media platforms is what primarily affects the content shared on them, the spread of false news is difficult to limit by legal regulations. In Hungary, if the allegation does not constitute defamation, libel, or hate speech, the removal of the content cannot be legally demanded simply because the allegation is untrue. According to the Hungarian professional legal literature on the matter, the fight against mass manipulation can be more effective if it focuses not on misleading content, but on the tools and the methods of manipulation, thus avoiding the biggest problem of content-based restrictions. Who decides what the fact factual truth is. Perhaps a good solution could be for the legal framework to require only the action of the platforms and their transparency, but the concrete actions would still be technically in the hands of the social side, as well as helping to define the false news and determine the extent of actions. To sum up, there is no official classification of fake news in Hungary, but the professionals agree that the problem of fake news exists and the state should create a legal framework for the social media platforms. And I would like to thank for your attention and listening me.
Thank you so much, sir, for your speech. It's time for Mr. Marcin Rau from Polish team to showcase thema, fake news and deep news, differences and similarities in Poland, the role and importance of creating, disseminating and using the fake news in Poland.
Thank you very much. So, since we have only 10 minutes to discuss this huge topic, I'm going to keep things brief. To start off, I will try to sketch the place of deepfakes in the world of fake news and describe the relationship between them. Then I will bring some facts and figures and try to illustrate them and their negative impact on the civil society, as well as some strategies, how to combat them. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. And let's move to the first point. As my teammate Roland already introduced you, fake news are the reports published in media, often of emotional nature and sensational character, intent to manipulate and mislead the recipient. They are created not only for political or ideological issues, but also for fun, as a form of prank or just to attract somebody's attention. We can find them both in the traditional media as well in the social media, often by using a catchy clickbait headline. I have no doubts that each of you have already found or at least believed once in your life for any fake news which you have read. However, while the fake news are relatively well known, the phenomenon of deepfakes is quite new, and that's why arouses much greater attention. So, in order to understand it better, I will share a story with you which happened to me personally less than 1 month ago, and I was a victim of deepfake. So, 1 month ago, I received a message on Messenger from my friend, and it was a video where I was singing a pop song. However, it wasn't me. It was my picture with synchronized my lips to the rhythm of the song. So it was created by artificial intelligence because I am not a singer. So
maybe
one day.
You're a talented man.
Yeah, maybe one day, but for now my vocal skills are not sufficient to sing such
maybe you could try.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe another time. However, my point was, it was possible thanks to the app Wombo. It's a Canadian app which you can download from App Store or another mobile store, and just take a selfie, put some music, and just upload a video, and artificial intelligence will take care of the rest. So it's a very easy way to create your personal, funny deepfake at home. However, it might be also not just a funny thing, but it might be a dangerous tool to commit a crime or to do even worse thing. But before going further, let me divide deepfakes into 4 categories because they can be created in 4 different ways. The first one is the face reenactment by controlling a person's face expressions. Second one is face swap by swapping one face to the face of another person. Another one is the face generation, is by creating a completely new face from the images or movies. And the fourth one is the speech synthesis by creating a model of somebody's voice which can read exactly the same tone of voice as the targeted person. So, as you can see, deepfakes is the use of the artificial intelligence to create ultra-realistic fake videos in which people can say and do things which don't actually happen. Is this all possible because of deep learning, which is one of the methods of machine learning which drives the artificial intelligence? But for us, deep fakes rather means that we are in a really big and deep trouble. How? Because we cannot trust in any content anymore, and it can kill our trust to the information we get. So, it might be also a new weapon of mass disinformation, because the Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram algorithms are not prepared for an avalanche of such content, and they cannot identify them and classify as false. This brings me to the following question. What is such a technology will be used to destroy somebody's image, deprive of credibility, or humiliate in the eyes of public? Well, it's already happened, and what's more, it also can be used to commit a crime. I guess many of you have already seen a deep fake of Barack Obama saying offensive and ridiculous things about Donald Trump and Fox News television. However, I'm pretty sure that you didn't hear about another story which happened in 2019 in Great Britain. So let me introduce this story to you. The CEO of the British energy firm got a phone call from his boss, ordering him to make a bank transfer of $250,000 to the account of one of the suppliers. And however, as you can imagine, it wasn't the boss. It was the artificial intelligence voice technology which imitated the voice of the boss. However, it was such realistic that this technology even imitated his characteristic German accent. And the shafted CEO became suspicious when the artificial intelligence called him several more times, but it was too late. And $250,000 was gone. And a similar story happened last year to the Polish president Andrzej Duda. He was also a victim of a deep fake, actually of 2 Russian hackers, Russian pranksters, who used the voice altering technology and they called him to pretend they were calling as a UN Secretary Antonio Guterres. And after 10 minutes, President Duda realized it was a fake. However, the Russian tricked many other persons like Boris Johnson, President Erdogan, or Emmanuel Macron. So now the question comes, if the CEO of a big company or the member of the parliaments or the big figures can be tricked, so how can we combat the deep fakes? So this leads me to another, the final point of my speech. So basically, the answer for this question has been given almost 400 years ago by Francis Bacon, who said, knowledge is power. In the Western Europe, we are witnessing now the development of total new professions like a content curator, who is the profession of the person who is researching data and selecting most important and valuable content for the readers, for the private firms, or for the government. So such a profession might be answer for deep fakes, because the human perspective is something what for now is unavailable for the algorithm. And as my Hungarian opponents already have mentioned, the key to overcoming those threats is education. The educating new generation of internet users, because an ignorant, credulous, and easy placed person might be a victim in the hands of tricksters and frauds, both in the real and virtual world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation, sir. It's too bad that you do not want to sing for us, but maybe next time.
Maybe next time I will have to play my saxophone.
Okay, so that's the next proposition.
Why not?
Now I would like to please the next participant of the Hungarian team, Mr. Wyszyński, to present the topic. Fake news and deep news, differences and similarities in Hungary, the role and importance of creating, disseminating, and using fake news in Hungary. Please for your speech, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the floor. Thank you for the opportunity of to hold this talk. I will be talking about fake news and deep fake and how these phenomena are perceived and how they appear in Hungary. News in general is a form of societal communication of which false news, false information, misinformation, or disinformation have always been a part. However, with the recent changes in the media landscape, newspapers, radio, and television have taken a backseat to World Wide Web platforms. In this digital space, however, the social media platforms dominate the field of news dissemination. Thus, their importance has grown considerably, speeding up the news even more. This acceleration of the news started earlier than the internet. The emergence of the 24-hour news cycle was a natural consequence of the fast-paced lifestyles of the late 20th century. News agencies on television, the radio, and also in print scrambled to remain relevant to their audiences and also to advertisers. This meant, most importantly, getting the news out first. Every second seems to count in breaking the news, be it in written form or audio video. The abundance of news and the race to be the first one to bring it has no doubt much affected its quality. Breaking news headlines often appear on unverified tips as broadcast first, ask questions later seems to be the best business plan for remaining on the market. Accuracy of information seems to have taken a backseat to speed. The people making the news thus have no time to chew the cud. Of course, correcting the news is an option, and internet platforms provide for the possibility for prompt corrections to be made. All forms of media allow for the possibility to make later corrections. Such corrections may even appear to be speedier in online news. Although later corrections might not be enough to correct news errors, they appear to be the only option when errors are made in good faith. The discussion is way different when it comes to bad faith conduct from the part of news outlets. That is when we enter the realm of so-called fake news. The general trends in mass media, the way news are presented, is similar also in Hungary. Added to the speed of information in this so-called post-truth era, media plays mostly on people's feelings, even when presenting facts. Online news in social media has accelerated news consumption, so much so that people often only react to clickbait news sites and leads without even having read the whole article or listened to the entire material. In such an environment, the accusations of fake news abound. Of course, some of it is just hyperbole to attract the attention of people, but since scrolling has become the new reading for a lot of people, this genuinely contributes to a perceived burgeoning of fake news. It is important to note that news was generally meant to disseminate facts. However, nowadays, a lot of opinion gets mixed into the news, and a lot of facts are presented in a certain manner which allows for interpretation. People can now set their preferences as to the opinions they like, which feeds into social media algorithms, resulting in more of the same type of content reaching the user. This can obviously facilitate the spread of disinformation also. The question thus arises, what is fake news? Nowadays, this term has been used to point to news either from fringe media or from mainstream media. It is used regarding all sorts of content. It is far from an exact term as can be. It is generally used by people to describe news that they do not agree with. So this phenomenon is the same in Hungary as in many other countries. Fake news is a catch-all phrase. For this reason, I believe it should not be used in any sort of official document, legal act, or regulation, as its inaccuracy poses a great threat to freedom of speech. In what manner can such a phenomenon be regulated? How do we make a selection? If opinions can be labeled as fake news, any regulation could lead to an unjustified infringement on freedom of speech, on the right to an opinion, as already mentioned. I think a distinction should definitely be made between simple opinions or different views pertaining to identical facts and genuinely harmful false information purposefully presented as genuine news. Fake news is the dissemination of false facts with the express intention of misleading people. It can be done with the intention of generating a false image about someone, to distort facts related to a particular topic, to create chaos and mayhem, to turn public opinion against others, to sow distrust in state and media institutions, undermine democratic processes, and so on. There are lots of reasons for and many purposes for which fake news can be used. A number of situations when fake news is spread are regulated by the law so that people affected by it can seek remedy. It follows that depending on its purpose, the dissemination of fake news might be followed by criminal or civil liability in accordance with Hungarian law. The situation is the same with deepfake, as this is merely a tool which can be used for different purposes. And might I add, I believe that deepfake will definitely affect the imitation comedy scene. Some believe that fake news has an added political goal, which is pursued by people who spread it. Usually it is done around elections. In these cases, a large quantity of content appears which can be considered as being disinformation, usually disseminated on shady websites and with the help of social media. The intention of such materials is to change the minds of their target. Not all cases of dissemination violate the law or other people's rights. So regulation might not provide the best answer in such cases either. In the Hungarian strategy for national security contains a couple of paragraphs addressing the threat of fake news disseminated with the purpose of influencing international public opinion against Hungary. It also addresses the need for stepping up against fake news which threatens public order and safety. The Hungarian Constitutional Court also considers that it is necessary to step up against fake news, especially against fake news which aims to distort public discourse. However, leniency should be demonstrated towards public actors, public persons, who should have a wider right to an opinion and an even wider possibility to express opinions during campaign seasons. In conclusion, it must be noted regarding fake news and deepfake that it becomes genuinely important that the intention of their dissemination is, and what this intention is, and also how much they can shape or distort the news and public discourse. It is also important from the viewpoint of the legal protections offered by Hungarian law to the people affected by fake news and deepfake materials, the intention of their dissemination, as I had already pointed out repeatedly. As my colleague will show, there are a number of laws which afford protection to individuals against phenomena such as fake news and deepfake. However, the intention and the circumstances in which fake news and deepfake are used becomes highly important from the viewpoint of their application, as Laszlo will point out. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir, for your speech. I would like to please the next representative of Polish team, Ms. Ewa Płocha, to introduce their issue. Liability of the creation, dissemination, and use of fake news in Poland. Liability for the creation, dissemination, and use of fake news in Poland. One, the perspective will be by criminal liability, and the second one by the civil liability. Please for your speech.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, in Poland, there is no separate criminal liability for the creation, dissemination, or use of fake news. In other words, there are no legal regulations regarding solely penalization of this kind of actions. There are no solely fake news crimes in criminal code or other statutes. But still, a lie is a lie. And in some cases, it is punishable. However, it is always necessary to check whether the behavior can be qualified as a different type of crimes against the values, other values, and it's not an easy task. A crime may be committed when it's associated with the occurrence of a specific result. For example, fake news, actions with fake news could be punished as a defamation by means of mass communication. It also could be classified as an assault by means of mass communication. Other example is a recognition of it as an attack on the grounds of xenophobia, racism, or religious intolerance. However, it should be emphasized that these are crimes against honor or public order that concern only specific type of victims, not all types of victims. These are only examples. Of course, in some cases, different crimes could be committed. It is worth noting that it is also possible to classify the dissemination of fake news as incitement to commit specific crimes. In practice, undoubtedly, prosecution under these provisions may be very difficult and not satisfying. The situation with civil liability for the creation, dissemination, or use of fake news is quite similar. We also don't have separate civil liability for these actions. In some cases, it is possible to qualify dissemination or use of fake news as an infringement of personal rights. It is not easy because it requires verification whether a given statement actually infringes the personal interest of the person seeking protection of his or her rights. The victim should prove which of their specific personal interest has been violated and what the violation consists in. Usually it is about violation of honor, dignity, or good name. There is no doubt that the person who disseminated or used fake news in social media is the one who is responsible. In practice, however, what is hard to accept, these persons will often not bear such a kind of responsibility because it is extremely difficult to identify them, and without knowing their names, you can't sue them. Apart from that, it is worth noting that the responsibility can also lie with the service provider. About it was telling earlier my team colleague Roland, but I would like to underline that according to the Article 14 of the Act of Providing Services by Electronic Means, the service provider is considered responsible in two cases. First, when the content is a press material. I have to mention that this kind of liability is also regulated by Polish Press Law Act. In this case, the responsibility for the infringement could also lie with the author, editor, or any other person who caused the publication of this material. Second situation concerns content which is not a press material. The service provider's liability is based on a risk and, of course, depends on a prior breach by the user of service. However, the service provider is responsible for his own actions. If service provider have not removed information violating the personal rights of a third party, despite having knowledge about its placement on this platform. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madam, for your presentation. Please, for speech, next participant of Hungarian team, Mr. László Dornfeld, to present his opinion about liability for the creation, dissemination, and use of fake news, criminal liability in Hungary, and liability for the creation, dissemination, and use of fake news, civil liability in Hungary.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I would like to present my topic now. According to Section 2 of the Basic Law of Hungary, every human being has the right to life and human dignity, both of which are equally important and cannot be restricted. Due to its nature, Para 3 and 4 of Section 9 states that freedom of expression cannot be aimed at the dignity of others or the Hungarian nation or other national, ethnic, racial, or religious communities, as Álmos pointed out in an earlier presentation. Given the fundamental right nature of this provision, the state has a strong incentive to protect human dignity from harmful speech, such as fake news. People who create, disseminate, and use fake news willingly, especially if it harms the dignity of others or public peace, have to face legal consequences according to Hungarian law. Liability for such actions can be either criminal or civil or both in nature. In case of criminal liability, the main regulation is Act 100 of 2012, the Criminal Code of Hungary. There are two categories that can be applied in case of spreading fake news: crimes against public peace and crimes against human dignity and certain other fundamental rights. Two provisions can be applied from the first category, both of which deal with criminal acts of spreading false information about or during situations of public endangerment. The term of public endangerment is not clearly defined in detail in the criminal code, but there is a Hungarian judicial practice regarding it, and according to that, it includes the destructive effect of flood, explosive, radioactive, or other substance, energy, or fire. Someone commits the crime of threat of public endangerment if they make or spread false information or give the impression that a public endangerment event is imminent. The penalty is imprisonment of up to 3 years in general and imprisonment from 1 to 5 years if the act has seriously disrupted the public peace. The other provision is scaremongering. It can be committed at the place of public endangerment. This can mean the whole country in some cases, which means that the disruptive effect has already happened before this crime can be committed. The perpetrator has to state or spread false or distorted information before the general public that is able to cause disruption or unrest among the population. The penalty for this is up to 3 years of imprisonment. This provision was amended in 2020 among the COVID-19 pandemic with a second criminal provision. In this case, the criminal conduct is same as in the other one before. However, it has to happen during a state of emergency, and the false or distorted information must be able to hinder or prevent the effectiveness of the defense, in this case against the coronavirus. This amendment was widely criticized both from opposition parties and the media, and also the Western states, as a possible tool to silence opposition voices. However, in practice, it was used to clamp down on denialism of the pandemic and false information regarding the vaccination. The provisions under the category of crimes against human dignity are defamation and slander. Both of these can only be prosecuted upon private motion, meaning that the offended party directly has to pursue a legal remedy for the crime and take on the role of the prosecutor. This means that the state prosecutor takes on a passive role in the procedure. However, they have the right to intervene later on according to the law. In this case, the offended party is the one that has to prove the infringement of their rights. Fake news can be both defamation and slander if it targets a specific person. Defamation can be committed by a written or a statement which is able to harm the reputation of another person. It can also be committed by creating or spreading an audio or visual depiction of such nature. Slander is a defamatory statement in connection with the victim's job, public office, or public activity, which is made before the general public. If the target of defamatory or slanderous statement is already deceased at the time of the statement, the perpetrator of the offense can still be punished by the law, and it has to be requested by a living relative of the offended party. The Hungarian judicial practice defined general public as a means to communicate with a large number of people, typically through mass media or the internet. It means that the defamatory fake news statement in a Facebook comment can be prosecuted. Defamation, slander, and defamation of a deceased person can all be punished by imprisonment of up to 1 year, although in practice it is rarely used, and fine or community service work being the typical punishment. It must be noted that in the case of defamation and slander, facts can be proven by the perpetrator, giving justification to their earlier claims. This can be applied if the statement, publication, or expression was communicated for reasons of public interest or by a lawful interest of any person. In this case, the act cannot be punished by court. Civil liability is regulated in Act 5 of 2013, which is the Civil Code of Hungary. According to it, everyone has the right to uphold their honor and reputation and protect it from harm. Opinions harming honor are capable of adversely affecting one's social standing and are unreasonably prejudicial in their expression. Reputation can be harmed by making or spreading offensive and false statements or misrepresenting true facts. The victim of such conduct can seek legal remedy in the court, which can declare the fact of infringement, ban the perpetrator from further infringement, and coerce them to give adequate non-monetary compensation, such as a public apology or to publicly present the true facts, and to terminate the injurious situation. The victim of harmed reputation can also seek monetary reparation, the amount of which is decided by the court in one sum. The general rules of liability for damages should be applied in the case of this reparation. In 1994, the Constitutional Court of Hungary ruled that public figures must endure a greater deal of criticism from the press and the general public. This applies both in criminal and civil matters. However, the line where this toleration shall end is not clearly defined and must be decided on a case-to-case basis. According to the Civil Code, the protection of rights of public figures may be restricted to ensure free exercise of public opinion of others. This can be done to the extent necessary and proportionate without prejudice to human dignity. However, it must not harm the privacy of family life or home of the person in question. In case of a communication or conduct which is outside the scope of free debate in public matters, public figures enjoy the same protection as others. This applies to their family members as well. The term public figure lacks a comprehensive definition, and whether a person should be deemed a public figure is decided by courts on an ad hoc basis during individual procedures. This can cause some anomalies. For example, in a recent case, the court ruled that the celebrity in question, who has hundreds of thousands of followers online, cannot be considered a public figure. As we can see, there is no general criminal or civil provision in the Hungarian law for the liability of making, dissemination, and use of fake news, and several provisions can be applied depending on the condition, none of which are especially for fake news, but for other offenses that can be applied. Hungarian law staunchly defends public peace and the dignity of individuals, both of which can be harmed by fake news. In this case, the relevant criminal and civil law provisions can be applied to protect the community and the individual from harm and seek legal remedy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir, for your speech. The debate will be end soon. Now I'm giving the floor to two last speakers. I would like to please Ms. Klaudia Wuniewska, which will tell us about the impact of fake news on the freedom of expression in Poland, the impact of fake news on pluralism in Poland. Summary.
Thank you for giving me the floor. In Poland, freedom of speech and pluralism are constitutionally guaranteed rights and freedom of the individual, as well as the freedom of the press and other media, and the freedom and protection of the secret of communication. The Polish constitution states that everyone is granted freedom of conscience and religion, and the freedom to express their views and obtain and disseminate information. Preventive censorship of the media of social communication and the licensing of the press are prohibited. The Polish constitution states also that everyone is granted the freedom of artistic creation, scientific research, and the publication of the results, freedom of education, and the freedom to use cultural goods. In Polish legislation, it is only permissible to limit the rights and freedoms of an individual in such a way that does not infringe their essence. The normative basis for such a restriction is provided for in Article 31 of the Polish Constitution. Pursuant to this provision, restrictions on the exercise of constitutional rights and freedoms may be established only by act and only if they are necessary in a democratic state for its safety or public order or for the protection of the environment, public health and morality or freedom and the rights of others. These limitations cannot affect the substance of freedoms and rights. The scope of Article 31 of the Polish Constitution is universal because it applies to all freedoms and rights granted in this legal act. In addition to the constitutional provisions, the issue of fake news can be also regulated by Article 23 and Article 24 of the Polish Civil Code. These provisions concern the protection of personal rights in Polish civil law. They may provide a legal basis for requesting the removal of fake news. They also provide the opportunity to seek redress for a violation of freedom, honor, image, scientific or artistic freedom, which are personal rights. It is worth emphasizing that those provisions do not provide full protection against fake news, nor do they provide a complete guarantee that it will be possible to protect the personal rights of an individual against false information that is disseminated about a given person. A draft law on freedom of speech has been drafted in the Polish Ministry of Justice. The aim of the changes proposed in this draft is, among others, to protect people whose personal rights are violated by anonymous internet users. The draft provides for the introduction of a new instrument, which is a blind lawsuit, which provides for the possibility of filing a lawsuit for the protection of personal rights without indicating the hidden data, which are now necessary to pursue one's rights in court. It should be emphasized that the purpose of this act is to create conditions for ensuring the right to truthful information, which will be achieved, among others, by defining the obligations of service providers to guarantee the right to freedom of expression and access to truthful information. The Act defines the term unlawful content, which is understood as content that violates personal rights, disinformation, criminal content, as well as content that violates good manners, as well as disseminators or praises violence, suffering, or humiliation. The legislative initiative I'm talking about now is a pioneering legal instrument, which is the response of the Polish Ministry of Justice to the negative consequences of the existence of fake news on the internet. This proposed legal act deserves high appraisal, as it can be an inspiration for other legislators who are also dealing with the issue nowadays.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Now came turn to last representative from Hungarian team, Mr. Árgus Ungvári, to present the final issue, the impact of fake news of the freedom of expression in Hungary, the impact of fake news of pluralism in Hungary, summary.
Thank you very much for the floor. As the last speaker, I would like to once again thank the organizers for this great event and the highly intriguing topic, and also thank you for your kind invitation. And I would also like to congratulate the Polish team for their well-prepared presentations. To sum up our viewpoint on the issue of fake news, I would like to focus on the impact of fake news on freedom of expression and on pluralism. The presence of false news in the media is not an unprecedented phenomenon. However, its volume and the speed of its spread is a novelty in the age of internet, and especially in the age of social media. As my colleagues earlier pointed out, there is no legal definition for fake news in Hungary, and this determination is used as a catch-all phrase as in many other countries. The primary obligation of state actors in relation to freedom of expression and media freedom is to refrain from interference and censorship and to ensure a favorable environment for inclusive and pluralistic public debate. Therefore, under the constitutional regulations of freedom of expression, false information or lies cannot be prohibited in a general sense. As we already mentioned in first sense of the Hungarian constitution, a fundamental right may be restricted only in order to enforce another fundamental right, and in order to protect the constitutional value to the extent strictly necessary and proportionate to the pursued aim. Regarding freedom of expression, the Hungarian constitution, as well as other laws, lay down values and interests which have to be protected against the exercise of freedom of expression. Such values and interests relate to the constitutional order, human dignity, public safety, good reputation, or prohibition of discrimination. The Act on Freedom of Press and the Fundamental Rules on Media Contents stipulates the obligations of the press. These obligations require the provision of balanced coverage, and the respect for human dignity. In accordance with this act, media contents shall not violate the constitutional order or may not incite hatred against any nation, community, any church or religious group, nor any minority, or result in their exclusion. This act does not contain provisions regarding fake news. Even so, this lack of prohibition does not mean that fake news cannot be prohibited or cannot be punished. As my colleague Laszlo already pointed out, in the Hungarian law, there is no general criminal or civil provision relating to the creation, dissemination, and use of fake news, but there are several provisions which can be applied to protect communities and the individuals. The issue of restrictions of fake news is specifically interesting in view of democratic publicity. The open democratic societies depend on public debates that allow well-informed citizens to express their will through free and fair political processes. It can be stated that false statements are an innate part of political debates, thus they form a necessary part of the freedom of expression. As my colleague János pointed out, the case law of the Constitutional Court of Hungary seems to support that view, that this is much more beneficial for democracy if some untrue or even unjustifiable offensive statements are included in public discourse, resulting in fruitful public debates, than if those involved in public affairs fear the consequences of possible sanctions and resort to self-censorship. Media has traditionally played a key role in holding public authorities to account and in providing the information that enables citizens to form their own views on societal issues. This is how people can actively and effectively participate in a democratic society. Today, the internet and the social media have vastly increased the volume and variety of news available to citizens. They have also increased the possibility of citizens to take part in the democratic processes. At the same time, social media could be used to disseminate this information on a scale and with speed and precision of targeting that is unprecedented. Such disinformation erodes trust in state institutions and the media and harms democracy by hampering the ability of citizens to take informed decisions. Disinformation can also strengthen extremist and toxic ideas, increasing the risk of harmful deeds. Mass online disinformation campaigns are being widely used to sow distrust and create societal tensions with potentially serious consequences in the field of public safety. The spread of disinformation can also affect policy-making processes by skewing public opinion. Disinformation can be used to manipulate politics, societal debates, and electoral behavior. It affects progress on all types of matters, from climate change policy to migration policy, public safety, and public health. Disinformation diminishes trust in scientific research and empirical evidence as well. The disinformation spread during the coronavirus pandemic is worth mentioning as an example. In the past few months, Hungary also has faced a wave of false information being spread regarding the origin of the pandemic, questions around vaccination, as well as the national policy response to the challenges posed by the pandemic. As my colleague Laszlo pointed out, in part as a response and in part as an effort to avoid such disinformation, the Hungarian criminal code was amended. A secondary statutory element was introduced for the crime of scaremongering, specifically for emergency situations such as the pandemic. Summarizing some of the information mentioned by my colleagues and also reiterated above, I would like to reassert that fake news as it is used now cannot be prohibited. The word has too much of a general meaning, so a stricter and a wider regulation would result in an unnecessary endangerment of the freedom of expression. Of course, the fundamental right to freedom of expression does not mean an absolute protection of opinions. There are interests and public values on which the restrictions and limitations on freedom of expression can be based, as mentioned earlier. We believe that those civil and criminal laws which already pose the limits of freedom of expression are suitable and can be applied to protect society from the harmful consequences of fake news. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much for that speech. The second part of our debate came to the end. I would like to thank you, all speakers from both countries, for high level of speeches and for follow the time rule. Thank you also the head of the team, especially for helping in the preparation, and thank you for inspiration us. Thank you, although everyone from the audience for staying with us so long. We shouldn't have any doubt that the fake news dilemma and the censorship problem have lots of faces, even if we look only to our countries. Yes. So I truly believe that it was the first, but not last, scientific event raises the subject. To sum up, it's time to choose the winner of that debate. So we all are the winners. Every participant of that event is the winner. We want some new knowledge. So thank you so much once again. I, as the moderator, apologize if there were any mistakes by my side, by my speech or behavior. Thank you for your attention and see you next time. Thank you.